says he got up and left and he didn't check on what he heard. Because you're guilty. If you hear something but you don't check to make sure it's true, you're guilty. That's a crime. You're supposed to process the information, to decide which is the garbage to throw out, which is the good to keep. But you can't just let it come in and rattle around in your head. You're supposed to put it into the proper category. Is it true? Is it false? Is it still speculation? Maybe true, maybe false, but I don't know. Put it in these categories. The real certainty, that is the confidence that comes in the Qur'an, comes from a different approach. The certainty in acceptance of the Qur'an comes from exhausting the alternatives. To explain it this way, the book says it is a revelation. If you don't believe that, what is it? You have to come up with some explanation. You have a book. It's paper and ink. Where did it come from? It says it's a revelation. If it isn't, then where did it come from? You have to have some explanation. And the interesting thing is, no one has come up with an explanation that works. And in fact, the alternatives have been exhausted. Because they basically reduce to this. And it's been well established by non-Muslims. They'll tell you, well, the book, if it wasn't a revelation, either that man deceived everyone or somebody deceived him. Either he fooled people or somebody fooled him, one or the other. That's what the non-Muslim says. And they do an interesting thing. They fall into two schools, insisting on one or the other. You have a large group of people who have researched it for hundreds of years, and they'll tell you one thing we know for sure: that man, Muhammad, he thought he was a prophet. He was crazy. Astaghfirullah. But they're convinced that he was fooled somehow. Another group will tell you, because of this evidence, one thing we know for sure: that man was a liar. He fooled everyone. These two groups never seem to get together. In fact, if you look up many references on Islam, usually a reference will tell you both. They may start by telling you the man was crazy, and they finish by telling you he was a liar. They never seem to realize you can't be both. If you are deluded, if you think you are a prophet, then you don't sit up late at night trying to figure out how will I fool people tomorrow so they'll think I'm a prophet. In fact, a great deal of the Qur'an came in answer to questions. Somebody would ask the man a question, and the revelation would come with the answer. You see, if you are deluded, you think that an angel puts words in your ear, then when somebody asks you a question, you think the angel will give you the answer. You're crazy. You think that. You don't tell somebody, wait till tomorrow, I'll have the answer. And then you run to your friends that night and say, does anyone know the answer? This is a man who doesn't believe he's a prophet. You can't have it both ways. You could be deluded, or you could be a forger. You could be neither one. You can't be both. You can't mix them. But I say, what you have is one group of people who will tell you, they assemble a lot of evidence, and they say, because the Qur'an is not a revelation, we have to explain these things. And they have a list of things they must explain. They say the only explanation for these things is the man was deluded. He thought he was a prophet. And another group of people say, because the Qur'an is not a revelation, we must explain these things. And they have a different list of things. And they say the only explanation for these facts is the man was a forger. He was a liar. He knew what he was doing, but he lied. These two groups don't get together to realize that you have to explain both lists of difficulties. You need this excuse here, and you need that excuse in this place, but you can't have both. To give you an example, the kind of circle that people go in, you ask somebody, what's the origin of the Qur'an? They tell you it came from the imagination of a man. But then you ask him, if it came from his head, where did he get his information? That is, the Qur'an talks about a lot of things which the Arabs didn't know about. If it came out of his head, how did that information get in his head? Then they'll tell you, well, maybe he wasn't crazy. Maybe he was a liar. Some foreigner brought him the information, so he lied. He told people he was a prophet. But then you have to ask them, if he was a liar, where did he get his confidence? Why did he behave as though he thought he was a prophet? And then they have to tell you, well, maybe he was crazy. He thought he was a prophet. And they start over and go round and round in this circle. As I've illustrated the one point, you have the information, like the wall of Dhul Qarnayn. Who told this man about this place hundreds of miles to the north? Who told this man about embryology? And so on. When people assemble these facts, they have to assume that, well, somebody brought him the information and he used it to fool people. But now, if you assume that he was a liar, where did he get his confidence? Why is it that, for example, he told some people to their face what they would not say? That involves being convinced that you have a revelation. The Prophet had an uncle by the name of Abu Lahab, or that was his nickname, Abu Lahab. Here was a man who hated Islam, who used to follow the man around. He used to follow the Prophet around. If he saw him speaking to a stranger, he'd wait till they parted, and he'd go to the stranger and say, "What did he tell you? Did he say black? It's white." That's how he thought. It was the opposite of what that man said. But about 10 years before this man died, before Abu Lahab died, the little surah, which is called Lahab, is in the Qur'an, and it says of this man, in just these few words it describes him, it says, in effect, he'll never change. He'll never be any different. For about 10 years, the Muslims could go to Abu Lahab and say, "It has been revealed to us that you will never be a Muslim." All he had to do was say, "Well, I want to be a Muslim. How do you like that? What do you think of your revelation now?" But he didn't do that. And yet that's the kind of behavior you would expect from the man. He always said the opposite of what the Muslims said. See how dangerous that is from a human point of view? You're saying to somebody, "You hate me? You want to finish me? Here, say these words and I'm through. Come on, say them, say them." But he wouldn't do it. In order to put something like that in your book, you have to be convinced that you really have a revelation. When the Prophet fled from Mecca to Medina and he hid in the cave with Abu Bakr, they could see people coming to kill them. Abu Bakr was afraid. Now, if this man is a forger, somebody who lies to fool people he's a prophet, what would you expect him to say when he sees people coming to kill him? You would expect he might say to his friend Abu Bakr, "See if you can find a back way out of the cave." Or squeeze over in the corner and keep quiet. But in fact, what he said to Abu Bakr on that occasion was to relax. He told him, "Don't worry. Because Allah is with us." He was confident. If you know that you're fooling people, where do you get this kind of attitude to say, "No, it's going to be fine"? So, as I say, you can go round and round in a circle, and people do. Because on the one hand, they may tell you Monday, Wednesday, Friday the man was a liar, and Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday they'll tell you that he was crazy. And you can't have it both ways, but they need both excuses to explain certain things. I had a minister in my home, that'd be about 7 years ago, and we were talking, and the Qur'an was sitting on the floor with the title facing down, so he didn't know which book it was. And I just pointed to the book. I said, "I have confidence in this book." Well, he looked, but he didn't know which book it was. He said, "Well, I'll tell you, if that's not the Bible, it was written by a man." So I said, "Let me tell you something about what's in that book." And in just 3 or 4 minutes, I told him a few things, nothing that I mentioned here, something else, about what is in the Qur'an. And after 3 or 4 minutes, he said, "You're right." So the man didn't write that book. The devil wrote it.